Okay, well, good morning and welcome. Thanks so much for being here with us this morning. My name is Heidi. I'm a librarian at the Pikes Library District. We're excited to have Allie Brandstetter here from Diversus Health to talk about healthy boundaries. So setting healthy boundaries can enhance your serenity. Join us today to explore examples of boundaries, finding what works for you, and setting boundaries. So welcome, Allie.
Thanks for having me, Heidi. I'm glad you're here, Kayla. Today we're going to be talking about healthy boundaries, what they are and how to stick to them. Like Heidi mentioned, my name is Allie Brandstetter, and I am part of the Colorado Spirit COVID-19 response team with Diversus Health. For the first slide, so when we think of boundaries, I consider boundaries one of the highest levels of self-care, and it sometimes can be the most difficult, but it can also be the biggest difference in living a more peaceful and controlled life. This quote, anger delivers important information about where one of our boundaries has been crossed. When we restore the boundary that has been violated, we honor ourselves. When we know ourselves and honor ourselves, we live with integrity, peace, and power, understanding that we are the kind of women who will rise and be brave enough to care for herself. Good stuff. I love this quote. So it's self-care is not just about, going for a run or having a glass of wine or journaling. Those things are awesome and things that we should do. But self-care is also about just being present and creating those boundaries, and boundaries play a large role in that. And it's often boundary problems that can lead to, burnout or feeling overwhelmed. Especially since we're going to be going through the holidays, we're going to be seeing family, and it's a pretty politically charged time right now. So it's important to do an inventory and really think about and reflect on our boundaries, maybe ones that we have, maybe ones that we need to redo, maybe ones we need to create, and just make sure that we think about the situations as well as what happens if someone crosses my boundary and how am I going to handle that. So we're going to dive into that today. So what is a boundary? My favorite way to think about boundaries is to think of them like a property line. You own your piece of property and you know where your property extends and where it ends and where your neighbors begin. Also, as a property owner, you are responsible for everything within that property line. Another way I like to think about boundaries is from one of my favorite authors, Glennon Doyle. She describes her family as on an island, and she only lets that drawbridge down for people who, will respect their lifestyle and add to it. And so she talks about it that way. And so if you are interested in any of her podcasts, I would totally suggest doing that or reading her books. She is just great. Another way to think of boundaries is limits and rules for relationships with other people and the world. So boundaries help separate us from one another. Our preferences and opinions are often boundaries that help give us a sense of who we are. Healthy boundaries help keep the good in and the bad out. When we have healthy boundaries, they help to keep the good thoughts, emotions, people's events, activities, and interests in our lives. And like I said, they keep the harmful things out. So if we notice we have an abundance of bad things, quote unquote, or we aren't living the life that we feel like we want to live, that could be a good indicator that there may be a boundary issue. So we're going to dive into some of the signs that could indicate that our boundaries need some work. And we will do that here. So what is within my boundaries? We don't have to default to everyone and everything and allow unmitigated and unlimited access to us all the time. We get to decide what and who gets to be in our lives. And so that's where boundaries really come into play. So these are things that fall within our property line, like we had mentioned, and things that we all have some kind of control over. So when we think about feelings, these are events that occur within us and that are our responsibility to manage and deal with. They're parts of us that we need to take ownership of. It's not uncommon to hear other people say, or yourself say, oh, he or she makes me feel so mad, sad, or whatever. In reality, no one can make us feel our feelings. Other people may act on our emotional reaction but our emotions are what keep our emotions are our own responsibility. And so it's really important to take ownership of that and create those boundaries. And it's definitely easier said than done. We're also responsible for our attitudes and beliefs and how we feel towards people, work, events, situations. These are all things that can affect our attitudes, but we are in control and responsible for our beliefs. Behaviors, again, common phrase, she made me do it. I did it because he did this or whatever. That's denying our own responsibility and boundaries. So similar to the next one, choices, we choose how we behave and what we do. So there can be, significant and powerful influence on our choices and how we behave, but ultimately we are responsible for those behavior and choices. Thoughts and desires, like feelings, this is often a difficult one, but again, ownership, responsibility, and then desires and our resources and possessions are all within our property line. So Dr. Nicole LaPera's research includes these 5 different boundaries. And so I'm going to go over them and describe them and then give some examples. So emotional, this can include emotional dumping. So sometimes we all have that friend, we see their name light up on our phone and we're like, oh, I cannot deal with that right now. Or they want to call and they have drama, or they want to tell you about all their problems. And, sometimes that's crossing a boundary. And if you speak to someone, or if you spend time with someone and you notice you're feeling a little drained afterwards, that may be a good indicator that, some boundaries are being crossed. So especially depending on, your profession, if you're in a helping profession and you're natural at, having those positive relationships and giving advice or counseling, your friends are going to want to come to you. So it's important to create those boundaries so that you maintain positive mental health. Sometimes it's completely normal, but it's important just to be aware of how things affect your mood, and also be aware of you dumping on other people as well. And so just knowing, or maybe asking a friend first before you want to vent, it's like, hey, I need to vent. Do you have emotional space for this right now? And then you guys can kind of dig into that. Emotional boundaries can also include invasive questions. And so some people are just not comfortable discussing things, and that's okay. Some people are more open than other people. And if, you don't feel like answering someone's questions, it feels like none of their business, you don't have to discuss that. And so examples can include personal life at work, or talking about the vaccine or politics. And you don't have to tell people your opinions if you don't feel like it. And again, it's important to be aware of this on the other side as well, and be considerate of the questions that you ask people, and just kind of know, read your audience and know what you're asking. So materials. So materials can include lending friends or family members things such as clothing, vehicles, tools, bakeware. You don't have to loan out everything that you have. You can say no. And there are ways to say no that, are nice. If you have a friend that's always borrowing your books and you get them back and they aren't in the same condition that you gave it to them in, you can have that discussion with them and you don't have to continue loaning them out. As we borrow our friends and family's belongings, it's important to be mindful of that as well. Time and energy. This includes plans and favors personally and professionally. So you don't have to say yes to everything you're invited to, and you don't have to say yes to every favor someone asks from you. You don't have to say yes to helping your coworkers every single time or picking up extra shifts. You really have to look at yourself, because saying yes to one thing is essentially saying no to something else. So by saying yes to picking up an extra shift, that's saying no to, getting that run-in that you need, or, cleaning your house or whatever you want to do. I like to think of saying yes as saying no to something else. So that's important to consider. A hot topic right now is most people are working from home. And so it's important that we create those boundaries and specific work hours where we actually, transition out of work into our home life, and that those two things don't blend together, which is also difficult. And so sometimes it's just good to unplug from your work computer or whatever after you've completed your hours. And it's okay not to respond to emails when you're off work. And so protect your energy. Mental boundaries. This includes your thoughts, values, beliefs, opinions. Kind of like I was talking about earlier, it's really politically charged right now with vaccines, and everyone has an opinion out there. And so you don't have to have the same opinions as, everyone, like your partner or your family or your friends. You're allowed to have your own ideas and beliefs. And so sometimes people in our lives try to really push their beliefs on us or make us feel like we're wrong because we don't believe the same things that they believe in. And that's crossing a boundary. So being able to say, I hear you, I have my own opinion, so let's agree to disagree. And so that's okay. You don't have to follow other people's, beliefs just because they want you to. Physical boundaries. So this includes personal space, PDA. Maybe a partner likes PDA and the other one, it makes them uncomfortable. So if your coworker or someone makes comments about your physical appearance or, makes you feel uncomfortable in any way, that's crossing a boundary. So anytime you don't feel comfortable, a boundary has been crossed. That's a good way to indicate it. So, speak up, say, stop, this doesn't work for me. And then, move on. All right. So signs that your boundaries may need some work. So feeling like you're spread too thin, feeling resentful in some relationships. If you're always available for others, always feeling drained or depleted, it's a good indicator that you need to look at your boundaries. Saying yes when you don't want to. This is often the disease. This is often called the disease to please. And so when we say yes to every request, and even when it's not what we want to do. So this can look like burnout and eventually lead to feelings of resentment. When we don't say no, we want to or need to say, when we want to say no, we have to feel comfortable saying that and, putting our foot down. So, not respecting other people's boundaries is also important for us to consider too. I know I talked about saying yes to something and saying no to something else, but it's also, sometimes it's important to say yes, like if you have been stuck at home or quarantining and you don't really feel like going out, maybe say yes to, your self-care or calling that friend. And it might be stepping out of that comfort zone, but it can make all the difference. So if you want to look for feelings of resentment, isolation, exhaustion, those are all signs of burnout and that you may need to take a look at your boundaries. So how do we set boundaries? When we start doing the inventory and we realize, okay, I think I need to set boundaries in these certain places, where do you start? So pay attention to your feelings. Some boundaries will be easy to figure out. And, we don't like when people break our things or insult us. Those are easy boundaries to know, but others will be a little more challenging to figure it out. So something, is like emotional boundaries, maybe a little more difficult. When you have a strong emotion or experience something that leaves you a little uneasy, there may be a boundary issue. And so your feelings can help identify what's okay and allowable and what's not. So it's important to really, be mindful and aware of how things make you feel. It's the idea of putting on your oxygen mask before others. So think about it. When you recharge, are you an introvert who needs time to recharge alone? Are you an extrovert who needs time to recharge in groups of people? Scan your relationships, scan your routine, know your commitments. A lot of reflecting is a good idea. Some areas that may need looked at include relationships with parents, kids, in-laws, neighbors, exes, social media, time in general. work, social life, church life. I mean, the list goes on. So it's important to trust yourself. And if you're feeling, you are feeling a certain way for a reason. So trust that feeling and go with it. After you've identified that there may be an issue, it's time to identify why you want to create a boundary. And this step is important. For example, if you're tired, you need to get more sleep. Why? Because you're tired. So why is probably the most important thing in this step. You need more time with your family. Then, you know, why is that so important to you? Because it helps you feel like yourself and whatever. So deciding specifics, where and what is going to change, and then voice that. And it's important to remember that people are not mind readers. So others may not even be aware of what your boundaries are, or that they're crossing a boundary. You know, if you don't communicate your boundaries, it's a lot easier for people to violate them because they just are unaware. And it's our responsibility to communicate our limits and boundaries. And also, don't feel bad if you have to protect your energy so you can be the best form that you can be. Number 4, hold your line, stick to the plan. It may be uncomfortable at first for you and for other people, but their comfort is not your responsibility. You're responsible for setting the boundary. Once that's done, all you have to worry about is, you know, remembering why you set that boundary, and other people will get used to that around you, and it will become the new normal. So sometimes this can be hard, and that's why it's important to go back to the whys section of this, and it will get easier with time. And like I said, it will be the new normal for people. So some things to keep in mind: it's not selfish to set boundaries. When setting boundaries, you may get some pushback or guilt trips about setting them, and your boundaries are in place for your well-being, not to benefit anyone else. Also, if you're not used to setting boundaries, you might feel guilty or like you're being mean or something. But lots of times, if you're not used to saying no, you also might feel bad. And that's normal, part of growing your boundary muscle. So as you get more and more practice with this, you will become better, and those feelings of guilt will diminish, and others will start respecting those boundaries. Let's see here. Oh, others may not like your boundaries, especially if they're not used to you saying no or standing up for yourself, you know. Again, this does not mean that your boundary is wrong or inappropriate. It may also take some time for others to just get used to you, you know, speaking up for yourself. And then they're like, okay, I can't ask her to do this for me every time or whatever. Healthy boundaries are flexible, so it's not a one and done deal. There's room for reevaluation as things change, and boundaries should be adaptable to whatever's best for you. All right, so if you're not used to setting boundaries, these questions might help you evaluate the boundaries that you want to set. Just some things to keep in mind as you start to do this inventory. Number 1, is this a healthy boundary? Is this boundary for me to help enhance my serenity? Am I setting the boundary in an attempt to control someone else? Am I setting this boundary to antagonize someone else? Will this boundary help me be a better person? Is this boundary still necessary? Do I still need it, or can I let it go? So these are all things to think about as you start setting a boundary. Like, what is the boundary actually for? Is it really for, you know, your mental health, or are you, you know, trying to get back at someone, or maybe hurt someone else, or, you know, whatever it is, just do that deep dive and really understand why you need the boundary. Boundary success. As you start to implement boundaries, these are going to be some benefits that you'll experience. You'll be more at peace, less resentment, less anxiety, less worry and thoughts, improved sense of self, more emotionally stable, improved thought, improved life, increased sense of freedom, feeling less pleasure in your schedule, feeling less pressure in your schedule. So there's a lot of benefits to these healthy boundaries. So does anyone have any examples? Kayla, do you have any examples of boundaries that you set that have really made a world of difference for you?
Yeah, just thinking about a friendship that I had, and she would always ask me to like watch her son for her, which I didn't mind because I knew she was in a bad place, but it became like so much that I was like staying up really late to like watch him. So I had to set some boundaries there. And that was like probably the biggest one that I've ever done. And there were those feelings of like guilty and it was just uncomfortable because I'm not used to like voicing that.
Yeah, but how did she take it? I mean, was obviously you set a boundary and you stood by it and it became the new normal and it wasn't as big of a deal anymore. Did she take it okay?
At first it was like, okay, I'll just figure something else out. And that kind of like lifted like the pressure off of me. And so like I still like there's like boundaries set in place now of like, I can't watch them until 11 o'clock at night. So it's like it wasn't like completely shut off, but there was other boundaries to minimize the stress off of me. So
Nice.
it was
good for you.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So we're going to end with this quote: love yourself enough to set boundaries. Your time and energy are precious. You get to choose how you use it. You teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and what you won't accept. So remember that moving forward. And thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Allie. That was awesome. And this was recorded, so I'll put it up on our YouTube channel today, so it will be available to access at any time.